Welcome, sleepless spirit. I'm your storyteller tonight, here to guide you gently into the shadows of slumber, where dreams take over and worries fade away. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more bedtime tales, whispered just for you. Let me know in the comments, where in the world are you watching from, and what time is it as you listen tonight? And if there's a story you've been longing to hear, something spooky, something comforting, tell me. I'm always listening. Now, tuck yourself in. Let the darkness wrap around you like a warm blanket. It's time to let go and drift into the story. Outside Earl's Wayside Diner, Sarah Blackwood's 18-wheeler pulled to a stop as the Montana sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and purple. On this abandoned section of road, the neon open sign served as a beacon for tired passengers as it flickered against the encroaching darkness. Sarah looked at her reflection in the side mirror, her blonde hair pulled back in a handy ponytail. She was 38 years old, and the laugh lines around her eyes had gotten deeper. The woman who made her life on the continuous ribbon of asphalt that united America's little towns was all that most people saw. They failed to notice that she never sat with her back to the door, and that her eyes were always searching her surroundings. Certain habits, particularly the ones that had sustained her, died hard. The three motorcyclists slowed on the highway behind her, their riders exchanging meaningful looks before going past the diner, but she didn't notice them as she stepped from the guam, her boots crunching on the gravel. One of them pulled out a phone and stared at her license plate, talking furiously, but she didn't notice. She was unaware of that. Her peaceful existence would be destroyed like the windshield she was going to put someone through, and this gravel would be stained with blood before the night was finished. In her heart, though, she might have been anticipating this day all along. Earl's Diner had its usual scent: grease, apple pie, and coffee. When Sarah's entrance was signaled by the bell above the door, many heads turned in her direction. A few everyday truckers lifted their cups and greeted each other. To them, she was simply Sarah, was the owner of Blackwood Transport, a modest but trustworthy shipping business. She's tough enough to compete in the male-dominated trucking industry while still being attractive enough to draw attention. Earl called from behind the bar. That's the usual Sarah, since before Sarah was born. The owner, who was in her 60s, had been serving coffee here. You know it, she said, as she sat onto her preferred counter stool, the one that provided a clear view of the parking lot and the entrance. Another old habit. Earl set down a mug of black coffee, he said. Leaning down, he said in a hushed voice, "Have you heard about those iron vultures?" Something flared in Sarah's eyes, but her face was neutral as she said, "Been making trouble up and down I-90. Highway patrol's been looking for them." She wrapped herself in a lie, saying, "Can't say that I have," putting hands around the hot mug. Actually, she had been following the motorcycle gang's news for weeks. Earl gave a nod in the direction of the tiny TV set up in the corner. Grainy, security footage of individuals wearing leather jackets with vulture patches emblazoned on their backs was shown in a local news broadcast. "Been hitting truckers, too," Earl adding that the bottom ticker said, "Biker gang suspected in string of thefts and assaults across 3 states, Nicky business, intimidation, and freight theft." Sarah sipped her coffee slowly and said, "I'll watch." Sarah looked more closely at the screen, while Earl stepped aside to tend to other patrons. The camera captured a clear image of a tall, strong-built man with a hammer tattoo on his neck, which was stated in the caption of the silver pendant around her neck caught the light as she leaned forward, and most people assumed it was just decorative and unusual geometric design that looked vaguely military. Mason Davis, also known as the Hammer, was a person of interest in connection with the gang's activities. Something about his face triggered a memory, but Sarah pushed it aside because the past was the past and she had worked hard to keep it buried. Sarah's phone vibrated in her pocket. A text message from an unknown number. "Iron Birds heading north. Cargo valued. Eyes awake. and her jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Her trucker buddies knew that was the emblem of a classified FBI tactical unit that officially didn't exist. The man who had recruited her 14 years ago, Director Ellis, trained her and eventually gave her a new identity than as she had walked away 5 years ago. If he was contacting her now, something significant was going on. Sarah erased the message and drained her coffee in one long swallow because she had to get back on the road, and her delivery schedule gave her the ideal cover, a valid excuse to be anywhere at any time. In addition to spare parts, her truck's hidden compartments held equipment that no regular trucker would carry. She was about to place a $10 bill on the counter when the bell above the door rang again, causing the diner to suddenly become unusually quiet. 6 men entered wearing leather jackets bearing the Iron Vulture's insignia, with Mason Davis at the center of the group, his 6'4" frame taking up most of the room. "Nice place you got here," Mason said to no one in particular, his voice full of the effortless confidence of someone accustomed to intimidating others. "I hope you don't mind if me and my brothers grab a bite," he said, his hammer tattoo on his neck seemingly pulsing with every heartbeat. To his credit, Earl remained professional throughout. "Feel free to take a seat wherever you choose. There are menus available." The youngest of the group, barely 20, kept touching his waistband, and 6 men with at least 3 visible weapons, poorly concealed under jackets, were present. Sarah kept her eyes down and stirred the remnants of her coffee. Her posture was purposefully casual, but her senses were sharpened, cataloguing details with practiced precision. Mason had a knife strapped to his ankle. The bikers spread out, taking a booth near the door, but Mason strolled to the counter, selecting the stool next to Sarah. He was nervous, likely carrying a gun, and had never fired outside a range. The oldest, a weather-beaten 50-something with a grey beard, was the most dangerous, his eyes constantly moving, setting the mark of someone who'd seen real violence. "Hey sweetheart, how are you?" Without glancing at the menu, he inquired. Sarah calmly responded, "I'm not your darling," without looking at him. "And the apple pie's decent. That your rig outside back would transport," Mason said with a laugh that was devoid of humor. "Got a mouth on you? Huh. I like that in a woman." He leaned forward, encroaching on her personal space. His smile showed a chipped front tooth. "There are many dangerous kinds out there, I manage." Sarah turned to face him, her blue eyes steely. "Nice setup. Independent operator. Huh, must be tough all alone on these roads." Mason lowered his voice and said, "My boys and I, we provide security services for independent truckers in this territory. Insurance, you might say." His gaze swept over her, taking in the fitted flannel shirt, the faded jeans, and the boots that had seen thousands of miles. "I bet you do, but everyone needs protection sometimes," he said. Sarah arched an eyebrow. "I already have insurance, thank you." Mason's smile dimmed a little, not the kind of smile I'm referring to. "I see road accidents, truck damage, driver injuries, and hijackings." Sarah's hand shot up, grabbing his wrist in a grip that made his eyes widen in surprise, and he reached out, brushing a finger against her pendant. "Don't touch what isn't yours," she said quietly, pressing just enough on a nerve point to send a clear message before letting go as if nothing had happened. "No offense meant," he said, casually rubbing his wrist, "just being friendly." Mason's expression briefly flashed confusion before being swiftly replaced by anger. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by a woman who barely cleared 5'7". However, something cold and assessing in her eyes caused him to hesitate. "But consider what I'm offering. You can enter our land safely for $300 per week. Inexpensive, at twice the cost, in case you decide to change your mind," he said, sliding a business card across the bar. "I'll do that," Sarah said, picking up the card and looking at it for a while before putting it in her pocket. She left the cash on the counter and got up. The other customers studiously avoided her gaze, suddenly engrossed in their food, but as she approached the door, she could feel Mason's eyes on her back. calculating, reassessing. Earl caught her eye as she asked him a question, and Sarah gave an almost imperceptible shake of her head. Outside, the evening had grown dark. Every sense was on high alert as Sarah made her way to her truck. The parking lot was dimly lit, with deep shadows between the few cars, their perfect ambush territory. She walked purposefully, carrying her keys, choosing a path that would keep her from being exposed for too long. After locking the doors and taking a deep breath inside her truck, Sarah took out her phone and business card. Mason had handed her the card, so she took a picture of it and sent it to the same unidentified number that had texted her earlier. No message needed. While she waited for a response, she opened a secret compartment under her seat and found a sleek Glock 19, checked it quickly, and put it back in its hiding place. Another compartment, this one behind the sleeping berth, held surveillance equipment that would make Sarah started the engine, the familiar rumbling offering a strange comfort. She looked in her rearview mirror as she moved out along the interstate. Most law enforcement agencies were jealous. Her phone vibrated. One message confirmed link. Bigger than we imagined. Proceed with caution. View mirror. The Iron Vultures. Motorcycles were still parked outside the diner, but they weren't following yet. She drove for an hour, staying precisely 5 miles over the speed limit, slow enough to avoid unnecessary attention from the highway patrol. Her mind mulled over potential outcomes and backup plans. The Iron Vultures were small in comparison to other criminal organizations, but they were growing quickly. Director Ellis wouldn't have gotten in touch with her unless they were involved in something important. Sarah pulled into an abandoned rest stop, which had been closed for renovations, and the parking lot was dark and empty. It was ideal. She backed her rig into a position that allowed her to see clearly in every direction, and then she went to the sleeping compartment. She took an untraceable satellite phone from a secret safe, dialed a number from memory, and said, "It's me." When the line connected, Blackwood. It had been some time since she was transformed from a bright FBI recruit into something more specialized by the male, authoritarian director Robert Ellis, who was speaking on the other end. "We both know it was never going to work. Not long. Enough. If you're calling me back in," Sarah said. "I'm retired, remember. You made contact. They made contact with me." "Hammer," Mason Davis said. Sarah thought, "They're growing operations, going from simple intimidation to a structured protection racket. They have resources organized. The way they've spread, tattoo, just like the surveillance photos, offered me protection for my trucking business. We think the Iron Vultures are just the outward manifestation of something much bigger. They've been smuggling not just drugs, but military-grade weapons across state lines. That's not their style. They don't have those kinds of connections. Across state lines suggests coordination beyond what a typical motorcycle gang would have." Ellis said, "Your instincts are still sharp." Sarah scowled. Ellis's silence was sufficient indication that someone was supporting them, someone with resources and ties to foreign suppliers. Sarah thought, "You think it's him, don't you? That's why you contacted me specifically." "Charles Whitman," she whispered, the name stinging her tongue. Ellis warned, "We don't know for sure, but the operational patterns match his methodology, creating layers of deniability, using existing criminal organizations as cover." Sarah touched the scar on her abdomen that was hidden beneath her shirt without realizing it. 5 years prior, at an operation in Chicago, former CI operative Charles Whitman had shot her. "I left that life behind," she replied, her voice tightening. "I built something new." She had survived, whereas her boyfriend had not been so fortunate. "Sarah, did you really? Or did you simply create the ideal covert independent trucker, one who is always on the go and has no fixed address?" "Always on guard, always prepared." Ellis hesitated. "Did you never stop watching over your shoulder?" Sarah remained silent. Both of them were aware of the reality. Ellis went on, We're not asking you to return permanently. Please assist us in verifying the link. Should Whitman fall behind, we must know this. They have already identified you as a possible target for their protection scheme. Make use of that. And I'll respect your choice if I say no. However, Sarah, wouldn't you rather to know whether it's him? Don't you want to be ready when he finally locates you? Since we are both aware that he has also not forgotten you. Phantom anguish appeared to pulsate through the scars. For a while, Sarah closed her eyes, seeing pictures behind her eyelids, blood on pavement, her partner's blank expression, Whitman's icy grin as he fired the shot. Finally, she stated, I'll need resources. Equipment is back up and ready. It's already set up. Everything you need is in the storage locker in Billings. Code is your old badge number, Ellis said hesitantly. When Sarah heard the names, she became emotional. Jackson and Martinez, two of your former teammates, are on standby. They're in position if you need them. She had trusted Daniel Jackson and Sophia Martinez with her life on numerous occasions, and they were part of her tactical unit. I work alone, she stated resolutely, but they're there if you change your mind. Every 12 hours, check in. I am aware of the procedure if we do not hear from you. Sarah put the satellite phone down and hung up. A part of her wanted to drive away and vanish into the vastness of America's highways, as she had done before, but another part, the part she had attempted to bury, hummed with a familiar energy. She gazed out at the darkness beyond her windshield, 5 years of meticulously constructed normalcy, threatened by ghosts from her past. Sarah started the engine, knowing that she had a delivery to make in Billings tomorrow and, apparently, a storage locker to visit. Dawn was breaking as Sarah pulled into the delivery depot in Billings, going through the motions of mechanically paperwork unloading and having a casual conversation with the warehouse manager. This was her chance to finally close the chapter that had ended with her partner's death and her own retreat from the world she'd known. The storage facility was on the outskirts of town, a plain building with keypad access and few security cameras. Sarah parked her rig a block away and walked up with a baseball cap pulled low over her face, her stride deliberate but unremarkable. As Ellis had promised, the locker opened with her old badge number, and she found exactly what she needed inside. A leather wallet with credentials identifying her as an active FBI special agent was found at the bottom of a duffel bag, with her old life packaged and waiting for her return. She took what she needed, leaving the credentials behind. This wasn't an official operation, and she had no intention of identifying herself. The surveillance equipment was more sophisticated than what she already had, including secure communications, weapons, body armor, and medical supplies. As law enforcement, which would only make things more complicated and possibly dangerous for civilians, Sarah returned to her truck and carefully incorporated the new equipment into her existing setup, and by mid-morning, she was back on the road heading west on I-90, with a pickup scheduled for the next day in Missoula, which would take her right through what the Iron Vultures considered their territory-perfect bait. She paused for lunch at a truck stop close to Bozeman, specifically picking a location where other independent truckers frequented, and while eating her sandwich, she struck up a conversation, mentioning issues with theft and posing subtle questions about route security. In these close-knit communities, word would get around quickly, and by late afternoon, she was back on the highway. The radio announced a storm coming in from the west, with heavy rain predicted overnight. Sarah grimaced, knowing that bad weather meant fewer witnesses. As the sun started to set, illuminating the sky with brilliant oranges and reds, she noticed 3 motorcycles. The Iron Vultures had taken the bait, and she drove on as if she was unaware, keeping a steady distance behind her, not close enough to be noticeable, but definitely following. But inside, her mind had gone into operational mode, weighing her options, making plans, and countering plans. The highway narrowed about 20 meters east of her, passing through a section of road with steep embankments. Two pickup trucks were parked across the highway, forcing her to stop, and the motorcycles behind her had closed the distance, cutting off any escape. On either side, there were no exits, no witnesses, and little traffic because of the impending storm, the ideal setting for an ambush. Although this was happening sooner than she had expected, Sarah was prepared and calmly slowed her truck, bringing it to a complete stop about 50 yards from the blockade. 3 motorcyclists pulled up behind her truck, effectively boxing her in, and men, including Mason Davis, 4 of whom were armed and posed aggressively, emerged from the pickup trucks. Sarah grabbed her Glock and a tiny tactical knife from under her seat and slid them into her boot before taking a deep breath, opening the door, and getting out of the taxi. "Evening, gentlemen," she yelled, her voice echoing in the still air. Mason moved forward, his enormous body silhouetted against one of the pickup truck's headlights, and said, "There's a problem with the road." "No problem at all, Miss Blackwood. Just a toll booth." "You might say," Sarah shot back, taking deliberate steps closer. "I don't recall seeing any toll booths on this stretch of I-90, she said. Her posture was comfortable but alert, and she kept her hands visible. "Pretty women. Truckers who don't know how things work around here are subject to a special toll. Mason's eyes did not meet his smile. "Do you recall our discussion regarding protection?" "Now you're in the vulture zone, about 10 feet from him." Sarah came to a stop. The others were trying to flank her, and she could see them spreading out. Amateur maneuver. They were producing needless separation between them, lessening their numerical edge. "I recall," she remarked. "I also recall turning down your offer." Mason's grin dimmed. "This isn't how it operates. No one says no. When you force us to come pick up in person, the toll only goes up." One of the men threw him a crowbar when he snapped his fingers. "We can now implement this into different ways. The fees paid by you, now that you forced us to come out in this weather, let's say 1,000, or we start smashing stuff, starting with your headlights and moving on to your windshield, then your fingertips, perhaps." Sarah let out a sigh, seemingly just annoyed. "What about the third choice? You and your companions return to your cars and act as if nothing had occurred. I'll follow suit." Mason's loud laugh reverberated off the embankments. "Did you hear that women and boys have jokes?" With respectful laughter, the men surrounded her. "Last chance," Sarah muttered. "No, sweetheart. This is your final opportunity." Mason approached her with a slightly lifted crowbar. "Now get down on your knees." Sarah remained still. One of the men behind her received a nod from Mason. "Rick, show her we're serious." Sarah sensed someone behind her and heard footsteps coming from behind. She stayed motionless, waiting for the right opportunity. She had expected a boot to her lower back that would knock her to her knees, and that's exactly what happened. However, Sarah had vanished. The kick brushed her side as she twisted around at the last second. She dropped her assailant instantaneously. As her elbow struck his temple, the abrupt brutality and her unexpected competence caused the others to freeze for a time. Mason was still taking in what he had just witnessed, so Sarah took advantage of that brief moment to get closer. Sarah was already within his reach when he swung the crowbar in a broad arc. Using his own momentum, she grabbed his arm and violently twisted it behind his back. The crowbar hit the asphalt with a clatter. She swept her leg quickly, pulling Mason's feet out from under him and pushing him forward at the same time. His face collided with the glass of the closest pickup truck. His enormous bulk soared through the air. Blood spattered across the fissures in the glass as it spider-webbed around the impact point. It had taken less than 5 seconds to complete the sequence. Mason tumbled down the hood, smearing blood all about him. Dazed but awake, he collapsed to the ground. The remaining men were obviously unprepared for this turn of events, as they remained with their weapons half-raised and immobilized. Sarah's gaze, suddenly icy and predatory, swept over the group as she quickly spun the dropped crowbar in her palm with practiced skill. "As I mentioned, Her voice was deadly calm as she spoke into the shock stillness. The third choice. Now leave, finding his bravery or foolishness. One of the younger men hurriedly drew her knife. With a painful snap, the crowbar struck his wrist as Sarah sidestepped his awkward attack. She kicked the knife aside once it landed, then lowered the crowbar onto his knee. Screaming, he fell. Sarah's respiration scarcely raised as she questioned anyone else. The other men exchanged doubtful glances. In front of their eyes, their simple target had changed into something deadly. Blood gushing from a cut on Mason's forehead, he stumbled to his feet. He had a concussion, and his eyes were blurry. "What on earth are you?" He made a slur. "Just a trucker," said Sarah. "One that you ought to have departed alone," with her crowbar still in hand and her gaze fixed on the group. She retreated toward her pickup. Nobody intervened to halt her. As the wounded guys hobbled to the cars on their own, they assisted Mason into one of the pickup trucks. Mason's voice yelled, "This isn't over, bitch," as Sarah got back into her taxi. With a gloomy grin on the edges of her lips, Sarah turned on her engine, whispering to herself. "I'm counting on it," she said. After circling the pickup trucks, she hurried to make room for herself. She saw Mason, despite his wounds, just yelling madly as the iron vultures regrouped in her rearview mirror. She was aware of what would occur next. They would answer to their superiors. The woman who battled like a professional would be questioned. Higher levels would pique interest. Sarah reached for her satellite phone just as she had intended. Director Ellis needed to be consulted. Now that the operation was formally underway, time was running out. Word of an extraordinary encounter on a Montana highway may already be reaching the ghost somewhere out there. Like the conflict, the storm clouds loomed on the horizon, dark and menacing. Sarah was just getting started. In the distance, lightning flared, briefly illuminating the road ahead before returning it to the deepening darkness. With a secret pass in hand, truck driver Sarah Blackwood drove steadily into the darkness, leaving behind the first bloodshed. In what would likely be a much greater war, Mason's neck hammer tatter had, in fact, brought back memories of seeing it in records linked to one of Whitman's well-known colleagues years prior. Although there wasn't definitive evidence, it was sufficient to support her suspicions. Sarah was resolved to finally bring the ghost out of the shadows where he was active, even if it meant losing everything she had worked so hard to build over the last 5 years and reverting to being the hunted rather than the hunted. As Sarah turned into the motel parking area on the outskirts, the storm struck with apocalyptic ferocity, but the rain beat down on her windshield and the horizontal sheets were pushed by gusts that shook even her 18-wheeler. The weather was ideal for her next task. She parked the truck far enough away from the office that the security cameras couldn't see her movements clearly. Long-haul truckers were the target market for the hotel, which was simple, affordable, and above all a place where people went about their own business. The rain quickly soaked Sarah as she snatched a duffel bag from her sleeper compartment and ran toward the motel office. She paid cash for a room at the far end of the building, and the night clerk hardly raised his head from his magazine. No questions, no credit card. The smell of cigarettes and industrial cleaner, barely disguised by air freshener, filled room 17. Sarah conducted a fast sweep, evaluating defensive positions, charting entry and exit points, and looking for surveillance, equipment, old routines. Just a forgotten spot in a forgotten town. The room was tidy. After removing her damp clothing, she stepped into the shower and let the hot water run over her body. Sarah looked at the scar on her belly, a puckered circle of skin, where Charles Whitman's bullet had entered 5 years prior, as steam filled the bathroom. Even bad was the exit wound on her back, which served as a sharp reminder of how nearly she had died that day. Sarah closed her eyes as memories came back to her without any bites. Michael Chen, her partner, is relocating to secure the east gate of the Chicago warehouse operation. The major players in attendance had received good intelligence about her. Shipment of weapons, The ideal chance to defeat Whitman after pursuing him for months. Then it had all gone wrong. The discovery that their operation had been leaked, the ambush. In the initial round of gunfire, Michael fell to the ground. Knowing it was too late, Sarah pulled him to safety. Then, with that icy grin on his face as he raised his weapon, Whitman struck himself as he emerged from the shadows. He had said, "You should have stayed retired." Right before he pulled the trigger, in order to bring Sarah back to the present, the phantom agony in her scar caused her eyes to snap open. She had barely made it. Whitman was no longer there. The official investigation found that the operation had been compromised by a mole in their own agency, but they didn't say who it was. Silently, the case had been closed. Sarah had been given a new identity to blend into when the squad disbanded. However, if Ellis was correct, Whitman had reappeared, and their paths were somehow coming together once more. As though to wipe the thoughts from her mind, Sarah dried herself thoroughly after getting out of the shower. She put on fresh clothes from her duffel bag, which contained useful black clothing that didn't impede her movement. Then she took out her satellite phone and set it on the bedside table. Almost instantly, it rang. Ellis said, "You missed check-in," without introducing himself. Sarah responded, "I was busy getting ambushed," as she stretched on the bed. On the freeway, Mason Davis and 6 of his cronies attempted to shake me down. A pause. Deaths. Nothing long-term. Mason's face is covered in windshield, and he has a concussion. His boy's knee and wrist are broken. The others are merely tending to their wounded pride. Ellis let out a sigh. What a waste of a nuanced approach. They produced the initial action. I gave the right response. Sarah combed her wet hair with her hand. In addition, this speeds up the chronology, their leadership. We'll hear about it. The risk was always that Whitman will recognize your work if he has any connection to the Iron Vultures. The Iron Vultures. Alina's voice hardened as she said, "Good. I want him to be aware of my arrival." Alina, this isn't about getting even. We require information. The weapons pipeline is evidence of the link. Even though Ellis couldn't see it, Alina sat up, her face displaying signs of annoyance. Although I am aware of the mission limits, let's don't act as though this isn't personal. Michael was slain by Whitman. You need to control your emotions, since he almost murdered me, and is still out there establishing his empire. I understand what he took from you, but rushing in mindlessly won't bring Michael back, Ellis said, his voice becoming a little softer. Alina shut the door. "I'm not rushing in," she finally said. "I'm setting the stage. The Iron Vultures will report to their leadership." She had never crossed professional boundaries, but the potential had been there simmering beneath the surface, and she would never know what might have been. Her eyes briefly widened at the mention of her former partner's name. "Martinez and Jackson are still on standby. After tonight's incident, I strongly urge no." Alina cut him off. "Not yet. Questions will be raised, interest will be piqued, and I'll be ready when they come for me again," which they will. Ellis remained silent for a while, saying, "You still don't trust us." "I trust you, Robert, but someone in the agency fed Whitman information 5 years ago until we know who I work alone. If things go sideways, you will need extraction. The more people involved, the more variables, the greater the risk of another leak." This was something Alina thought about. Daniel Jackson, a former Delta Force operator with a remarkable ability to predict enemy movements, and Sophia Martinez, the team's technology specialist, had both been cleared in the investigation of the Chicago incident, but so had all the other members of their unit. "Okay," she said. "I'll get in touch tomorrow." "Check your equipment drop." Ellis hesitated. "Be careful, Alina. Whitman's operation has expanded significantly since Chicago, and our intelligence indicates he's supplying. Supply chains can be tracked and disrupted." "Exactly. Find the link between Whitman's main operation and the Iron Vultures. Then we're moving with a full tactical team." Alina heard what Ellis wasn't saying. He's vulnerable because he has weapons to at least 3 major criminal organizations across the western states. This window, when she operated in the shadows with unofficial sanction, was her only opportunity to meet Whitman face to face. After the operation became official, she would be sidelined, a civilian liability at worst, a consultant at best. "I'll check in tomorrow," she said. "Same time. Watch your back, Blackwood." The line died. After putting the phone down, Alina went to the window and carefully opened the curtains to look out at the storm-lashed parking lot. Her truck was still there, raindrops falling in sheets off its trailer. There were no suspicious cars or hidden people, at least not yet. She went back to the bed and opened her duffel bag, taking out a secure laptop. The encryption would give Alina powered it up and started gathering information about the Iron Vulture's territory, including suspected operations and known associates. Mason Davis was prominently featured due to his criminal history and his pattern of increasing violence. Prior to joining the Iron Vultures 3 years ago, he had been a mid-level enforcer for a drug distribution network in Nevada, which intelligence had connected to Whitman's organization. Another connection, though tenuous. Alina worked through the night, with the storm serving as a fitting soundtrack to her gloomy thoughts. By morning, she had created a rough map of the Iron Vulture's operations using information from news reports, police bulletins, and her own observations. Their territory was centered on western Montana, with tendrils extending into Idaho and Wyoming. Their quick growth over the previous year indicated outside funding, connections, and legal protection, all in line with Whitman's method. As the light from the pale morning filtered through the curtains, Alina finally let herself sleep for a few hours, lying on top of the covers with Glock close at hand and her body facing the door. Even when she was asleep, a part of her senses remained alert to even the smallest change in her surroundings. When she woke up, the storm had passed, leaving behind a clear blue sky and the scent of fresh air. After checking her surveillance system remotely and finding that no one had approached her truck during the night, Alina packed her belongings, cleared the motel room of any evidence of her presence, and checked out before 9 o'clock. Once back on the road, Alina kept up her guise as a legitimate trucker, making her scheduled pickup in Missoula industrial parts headed for Seattle and continuing west on I-90. From the looks of it, just while driving, Alina was preparing her next move. The Iron Vultures had a clubhouse outside Cora, Idaho, which police reports stated was a former roadhouse turned into their headquarters. If she wanted to learn more about their relationship to Whitman, that would be the place to go. However, she first needed to set up a safe base of operations, a location to stage equipment plans. Ellis had used the storage locker in Billings as a resource, but now she needed one of her own. Alina pulled into a small, family-run truck stop just outside of Spokane, Washington, the kind where the food was homemade, the coffee was strong, and the owners remembered regular customers. She had been stopping here for 3 years, long enough to establish a rapport, but not so long that people knew too much about her. "Haven't seen you in a couple months," said Linda, the owner, who was in her 60s, warmly greeting her. "Please," said Alina, sliding back to the wall of her favorite booth, which had a clear view of all the entrances. Linda brought over coffee and a piece of huckleberry pie. "Are you passing through or staying a while? I have some days before my next haul. Believed that I might stay and perform some rig maintenance." Linda gave a knowing nod. "Well, Joe is still renting out that garage on his property if you need a place to park. The one you used when you experienced transmission issues the previous year." Alina grinned. Joe, Linda's husband, owned a large attached garage that had previously been used to service farm equipment on several acres outside of town. It was safe, remote, and ideal for her purposes. "I think that's a good concept. Is he present?" "In the back office, completing documents. I'll let him know you're present." A few minutes later, Joe was there, using a rag to wipe his hands. A veteran of the Vietnam War in weathered hands, with a constant squint. Alina had stayed with him before, and he liked her. He said without introduction, "Heard you might need the garage," and slid into the booth across from her. Joe looked at her face, his eyes perceptive beneath bushy grey eyebrows, and said, "If it's available, just for a few days." "Alina, are you all right? You look tense." Alina thought for a moment about telling him the truth, but Joe nodded slowly, saying that he would understand the vigilance, the necessary paranoia, and that involving civilians was out of the question, but that there would be some trouble on the road. "Nothing I couldn't handle, but I could use a quiet place to regroup." Joe had seen combat have that same watchfulness she recognized in herself. "Cash, I suppose, cash," Alina agreed, reaching for her wallet. Joe waved her away. "Pay when you leave. The garage is yours for as long as you need it. The rate is the same." Joe called after her as she was leaving, saying, "Whatever trouble you're in, be careful." Alina nodded once, acknowledging his concern without confirming his suspicions, and the garage was just as she remembered it, spacious enough for her rig with a small attached room that had once been an entrance. "No one will bother you out there," she said, finishing her pie and coffee in friendly silence. Office, water from a well, electricity, and most importantly, privacy. The closest neighbor was more than a mile away, with thick woods that provided natural screening. Alina backed her truck inside, and then spent the next 2 hours preparing her base of operations, turning the office into her command center, with weapons close at hand, communications equipment, and surveillance monitors, body armor, more weapons, medical supplies, and other concealed compartments in her truck to more easily accessible places. By late afternoon, she was prepared. Alina used the frequency assigned to Sophia Martinez to activate the secure communication link Ellis had provided. Songbird calling Raven. "Do you copy static?" Then a familiar voice. "This is Raven. Good to hear your voice, Songbird." The voice of her old teammate brought up a complex range of feelings in Alina, who had been close to Sophia before everything fell apart before Chicago, and Raven's status holding position in Spokane, with Eagle waiting for your orders. Eagle Daniel. Jackson's call sign. "I'm setting up surveillance on a suspected Iron Vulture site near Coeur d'Alene. No engagement is planned at this time. Information gathering only." "Understood. We have resources and equipment if needed. Tactical assistance is on standby." Thus, they were both close by, as Ellis had stated. The other person paused, then said, "It's been 5 years, Alina. You don't have to do everything alone." Alina closed her eyes for a while, reverting to her old habits. "I appreciate that, but I'm still operating solo for now." "Solo for now." "Don't," Alina interrupted. "Please, Sophia, just don't. Michael wouldn't want." Sophia gently addressed bad habits. "We're here when you need us. Eagle sends his regards." "Tell him I got them." Songbird out. Alina puts the communication gadget down. Another delay. Roger that. She had not anticipated Sophia bringing up Michael. It was a calculated move, and she became aware of a reminder of what had happened when Alina had attempted to manage things alone. However, Sophia had not been in that warehouse, had not witnessed Whitman's expression as he pulled the trigger, had not held Michael as he bled out on that concrete floor, and Alina pushed the memories away. She had work to do. By the time Alina arrived at the Iron Vulture's clubhouse in Coeur d'Alene, it was night, and she had left her truck at Joe's garage, using a dull rental car with tinted windows, her blonde hair now hidden under a dark wig, and her appearance changed enough that passers-by from the highway incident wouldn't recognize her. The clubhouse was located at the end of a long gravel drive set back from the main road. It was, in fact, a former roadhouse, its weathered wooden exterior lighted by harsh security lights, and the parking lot held a dozen motorcycles and several trucks, including a black Dodge Ram that Alina had seen in the highway confrontation, and she parked a quarter of a mile away in the lot of an abandoned gas station before making her way on foot through the surrounding woods. The darkness turned to shades of green by the night vision goggles from her equipment cache, and she was able to move soundlessly through the undergrowth. Alina set up a small but powerful directional microphone at the clubhouse's windows and took up her position at the edge of the cleared area around the clubhouse, with good sight lines to the main building and parking lot. Fragments of conversation drifted through her earpiece from inside crude jokes, arguments over sports, and the background noise of a group of men drinking and socializing. Nothing of intelligence value yet until the front door opened. The yellow light spilled onto the gravel lot, and Mason Davis, his face a remarkable collection of cuts and bruises from his experience with Alina's makeshift windshield facial, came out with an older man Alina didn't recognize, tall, lean, and military-looking despite his motorcycle clothes, with close-cropped grey hair and the fluid economy of a combat-trained individual. Alina adjusted her microphone, concentrating on their Mason was telling you that she wasn't just any trucker, and his voice made her move agitated. He was describing her as either law enforcement or professional military. The older man lit a cigarette, and the flame momentarily illuminated a hard-weathered face. She was described as blonde, in her late 30s, athletic, about 5'7", and wearing a pendant with a geometric design that looked military. Convenient, you believe she's researching us. I guess coincidences make me uneasy. Alina clenched the pendant. She'd been irresponsible and left it out in the open during the confrontation. The elder man exhaled smoke, his face contemplative. Get me the truck's registration details, driver's license information, everything you can find on this Blackwood. Transport, the man said, tossing his cigarette to the gravel and crushing it under his boot. And Mason, keep this between us for now. No need to alarm the higher-ups until we know what we're dealing with. Mason nodded, cautiously touching his bandaged face. What if she comes back? He asked. Her cover wasn't blown yet, but it was fraying at the edges, and the older man, obviously someone with authority in the organization, had picked up on exactly what she'd feared, that her appearance in Iron Vulture's territory wasn't coincidental. She will, the older man said confidently, because people like that always do, and when she does, we'll be ready. They went back inside, leaving Alina feeling sick to her stomach. Needed to move more quickly than expected, find the connection to Whitman before they found out who she really was. Alina kept up her surveillance for 3 more hours, recording faces, cars, and movement patterns. Around midnight, more bikers arrived at the clubhouse for what seemed to be a meeting. She was unable to get a clear audio feed from the main room, where they gathered, but she had glimpses of what appeared to be a planning session through a side window, with maps spread out on tables, animated conversations, and money exchanged. Something significant was happening. As the meeting came to an end, Alina took pictures of everyone departing. Using the older man from earlier came out of the clubhouse, standing straighter, more formal as he waited for the SUV's occupant. She would use a high-resolution camera with night vision capabilities. She would run facial recognition, later cross-reference with Whitman's known associates. She was about to pack up her surveillance equipment when a sleek black SUV with tinted windows pulled into the lot. Unlike the other vehicles, this one screamed money and sophistication out of place among the motorcycles and battered trucks. Alina shifted her camera to focus on the newcomer as the driver's door opened, and her blood froze. She recognized him instantly, even at this distance and in the dim lighting. Tall and broad-shouldered, moving with deadly grace, his blonde hair now streaked with distinguished silver at the temples. Charles Whitman, referred to as the Ghost in intelligence circles, had been fortunate over the years to be able to operate covertly and without leaving any evidence. As Whitman shook hands with the older biker, her finger tightened on the camera's button, taking picture after picture. They spoke for a few seconds before going inside together, and her heart pounded against her ribs. It was confirmed that Whitman was directly connected to the Iron Vultures, personally involved in their operations, whatever they were planning. It was important enough to, after 5 years of wondering if she would ever get another chance to face Whitman, he had appeared almost too easily. Alina forced herself to stay in position and monitor for another hour, but he didn't reappear. At last, as the eastern sky started to lighten subtly, she packed her gear and retreated the way she had come. Back in her car, Alina sat still for a few minutes, processing what she had seen. Alina started the car and drove back towards Spokane, her mind racing through possibilities, thinking that, if Whitman recognized her pendant from Mason's description, he might suspect her being in the area, or perhaps he was counting on her emotional response, her desire for revenge clouding her judgment. It felt wrong somehow, too convenient, unless he knew she was watching, unless this was a performance for her benefit. Back at the garage, Alina downloaded the surveillance photos to her secure laptop and started analyzing them. The older biker who had spoken to Mason was recognized by facial recognition software as Victor Clav, a former Spetsnaz operative turned mercenary, and his presence in the Iron Vultures raised even more red flags. Whitman had always been 3 steps ahead of everyone else, which was what made him so dangerous. This was not your typical motorcycle gang. They were being molded into something more disciplined and dangerous. Alina connected securely and sent the pictures to Ellis, along with the proof of Whitman's involvement. She then quickly showered in the small bathroom of the garage, changed, and let herself sleep for 2 hours on a cot she had set up in the office area. She dreamed of Michael, of blood on concrete, and of Whitman's icy smile. She reached for her weapon in the dream, but her hands would not move, and she tried to scream, but no sound came out. Whitman raised his gun, aiming at someone behind her instead of at her, and she turned to see Sophia and Daniel, who were not aware of the danger. The gunshot woke her, and Alina sat up, breathing heavily, her hand already on her Glock. The garage was quiet, save for the distant sound of birds declaring the morning. Her satellite phone rang Ellis's direct line. "I got your transmission," he said without preamble. Whitman's confirmed presence changes things. "We're mobilizing a full tactical team." It was only a dream, but the message from her subconscious was clear. Her former teammates were at risk as long as they were involved, even if they were only peripherally. "Alina, I want you to back off. Let's take care of this from here." This was what Alina had anticipated. "Not quite yet. We still don't know the target or what they're planning. You are no longer concerned about that. You've done everything you could to verify the connection. Now, this is a formal bureaucratic activity. This entails approvals of documents, wasted time, as the man disappears once more." Alina's tone became stern. "Robert, he's here now. Whatever they have planned is about to happen. We might not receive another opportunity." Ellis remained quiet for a while. "What do you suggest? Let me have 48 hours. I will penetrate further, see what they have planned. Your tactical team can then enter with full knowledge. It's too dangerous. Whitman won't if he knows you. According to him, the Broken Spoke is a recognized hangout for Iron Vultures. I drove by. There is only one main entrance, and the kitchen windows at the back are too small to offer practical escape routes. The parking lot has little protection, and is open and exposed. Security?" Alina inquired. "Minimally noticeable actions, no cameras outside, and most likely simple security inside. At a recruitment event, they don't anticipate difficulty. They want to come across as genuine and friendly." The screen displayed a second window with Sophia's face in it. "Your cable now has a panic button added by me. Eagle and I will both know. You need to be extracted right away if you press it 3 times in a row." Alina gave a nod. "Mason Davis, what about him? During your reconnaissance, did you spot him?" Daniel gave a headshake. "No, despite what you did to his face. According to my sources, he's still in the area, and not in the hospital. That makes matters more difficult. Alina scowled. He'll identify me whether or not I'm wearing a disguise if he's at this event tonight. After that, we must make sure he is not present. Sophia said plainly. Daniel's eyebrow went up. What are you thinking of? With a piercing smile, Sophia reminded Alina why she had been such a successful agent. I believe Mason Davis needed medical attention after a tragic accident. Nothing that could kill him, but enough to keep him busy somewhere else. I can arrange that, Daniel said. I've located his home. A straightforward brawling problem on his motorcycle ought to resolve the issue. Alina's anxiety increased. This was progressing from the collection of intelligence to active interference. However, they were correct. Mason would ruin the operation before it even started by attending the recruitment event. Do it, she said. But not much damage. We're not killers. Daniel gave a serious nod. I get it. I will see to it that he just gets a few more bruises too. Go with the ones you have already given him. They worked out the specifics of the operation for the evening. In order to learn more about the Iron Vulture's plans and possibly land a job as a driver for them, Alina would go to the recruitment event with Jaime Carter. Daniel would remain outside the pub as an emergency backup, while Sophia would keep an eye on things from a distance. Additionally, if Whitman is present, Sophia asked a query they had all been trying to avoid. Alina's face became stern. I keep my cover. First, the mission, Alina, Daniel said. She interrupted. I understand what's at stake, for personal reasons. I will not jeopardize the operation. Her former comrades looked at each other, but didn't bring up the subject. They respected her expertise, but they knew her too well to fully believe her. Alina looked at her watch as the video call came to an end. The gathering at Broken Spoken is 6 hours away. It's time for the last preparations. She set up her tools on the workbench in the garage, the cable and a little ceramic knife that wouldn't set off metal detectors, and a hidden pouch with quick-acting seditious capsules that could be inserted into a drink if needed were already tested by the earpiece. Daniel would have a gun ready for her in case extraction was required, but she wouldn't carry her Glock too dangerously in case she was searched. Alina practiced facial expressions that belonged to Jaime Carter rather than Alina Blackwood as she examined her image and the tiny mirror. Jaime was willing to violate boundaries that Alina would never pass since she was desperate and somewhat broken by her situation. Jaime's smile had diminished, self-assured, her stance less dominant. She tested the name in her tongue and said, out loud, Jaime Carter, noticing that the character's voice was a little higher pitched than her own and had a faint Midwestern accent. Ellis's satellite phone rang once more. Status, he said without introducing himself. Everything is going according to plan, and I've received an invitation to a recruitment event this evening. This is precisely the type of operational escalation I was worried about. Alina, you're shifting from passive intelligence. Ellis's voice sharpened. Mason Davis will be temporarily removed as a potential threat to my cover. Removed how? Ellis said. Nothing permanent. Just making sure he's elsewhere during the operation. I'm already regretting giving you this 24-hour deadline, but it's essential for the mission, Alina insisted, and it's time sensitive, Ellis said, pausing. The tactical team is assembled and on standby in Spokane. The moment you have actionable intelligence on the Iron Vulture plans, or if anything goes wrong, they move in, understood. And Alina, you keep your cover. If Whitman is here tonight, no involvement. Do we understand? Alina's mouth clenches. Very clear. I mean it. I am aware of his treatment of Michael. What he did to you, but personal grudges are not the main focus of our operation. We must stop this pipeline of weaponry. Whitman will be held accountable through the appropriate processes. Alina answered. I understand. In a chilly tone. Ellis remained quiet for a while. Please check in both before and right after you leave the event tonight. If you are late, I will send in the tactical team. recognized. Alina felt a familiar emptiness as the call came to an end. Ellis had always been an administrator first, a field agent second. Despite his good intentions, he had no idea what it was like to stare into the eyes of someone who had robbed you of everything. To feel as though your hands are heavy with a partner's blood. Alina dismissed these ideas. Now, instead of being the agent out for vengeance, she had to concentrate on becoming Jaime Carter, the desperate trucker in need of employment. Slowly, the afternoon went by while Alina made the last preparations. Daniel said his mission was successful. Mason was sent to the emergency room with a broken arm after his motorcycle experienced a minor collision due to a handy brake issue. It was sufficient to guarantee that he would not attend the recruitment event, but not life-threatening. Alina made her last check-in with Sophia around 7:30. Having parked a street away from the broken spoke, wire is functioning perfectly, revealed Sophia. Alina quickly touched the hidden button on what looked to be a straightforward bracelet 3 times. Audio is clear. Eagle is in position with line of sight to the main entrance and the panic signal. Test it now. Succession. Sophia confirmed receipt right away. In a real-world situation, the extraction team would be mobilized. Alina took a deep breath and centered herself. Okay, I'm going in. Keep radio silence unless it's absolutely necessary. I'll set up regular bathroom breaks for updates if necessary. Acknowledged. The broken spoke was a weathered one-story building, with neon beer signs glowing in the windows, and motorcycles dominated the parking lot. Alina got out of the car and walked the short distance to the bar. Her gait now Jaime Carter, a little less confident to shoulders a bit more hunched, the walk of someone who expected life to disappoint her, with pickup trucks and a couple of sedans in between. Classic rock music blared from inside, loud enough to be heard from the street. The burly man stood by the door, verifying IDs and patting down newcomers. Alina went straight to him and said, "I'm here to see Tyler Walsh," adding a hint of doubt to Jaime Carter's voice. "He's expecting me." The man examined her, evaluating Jaime Carter. He spoke into a radio clipped into his vest, nodded, and then gestured toward the door, arms out. Standard pat down. Alina obeyed, maintaining a neutral expression as his hands moved respectfully and efficiently over her clothing, looking for weapons, and as she had anticipated, the ceramic knife in her boot and the wire under her clothes went unnoticed. Walsh is at the bar. Despite state laws prohibiting indoor smoking, the broken spoke was hazy with cigarette smoke. The customers were mostly men, most of whom were wearing some variation of the Iron Vulture's colors. A few women were there, serving drinks or clinging to members' arms. Tyler Walsh noticed her from his spot at the bar and waved her over with a warm smile. "Jaime, pleased you made it." Alina smiled back hesitantly. "I'm still not sure what I'm doing here, but I thought it couldn't hurt to listen. What are you drinking, smart woman?" "Beer's fine." Walsh gestured to the bartender, who brought 2 bottles quickly, and he clinked his against hers to open up new possibilities. Walsh led her to a booth in the corner away from the worst of the noise, and as they sat there, Alina observed that although the booth provided privacy for conversation, it also limited her options for leaving, which was a well-considered decision on Walsh's part. Alina took a small sip, being careful to limit her alcohol intake. "So, what exactly are these opportunities you mentioned? Let's talk somewhere quieter. The Iron Vultures aren't just a motorcycle club. We're a business organization with a variety of interests throughout the Northwest, and transportation is a major component of our operation." Alina played her part and said bluntly, "That means smuggling." Walsh smiled, grateful for her candor. "Our drivers are well compensated for those risks, starting at $5,000 per run, depending on cargo and distance." Alina raised her eyebrows, allowing Jaime Carter's desperation to be seen. "Among other things, we move products that various parties want moved discreetly, sometimes across state lines, sometimes across international borders. The profit margins are substantial and the risks are minimal with our protection. We don't work with just anybody. We need people who understand discretion, who can follow instructions precisely, who don't ask unnecessary questions, and who know that police border patrol is there if there's trouble. That's a lot of money. It is. Walsh's smile tightens a little. Our routes are carefully planned to avoid official, the discussion went on, with Walsh progressively disclosing more information about the operation, including regular routes into Canada and down to Mexico, specialized cargo that required careful handling and the organizational structure that shielded those at the top from direct connection to illegal activities. But if issues arise, we have resources to handle them. Legal representation, bail money, whatever's needed. We take care of our own. So what do you think? Walsh asked at last, interested in a trial run. Something small to start. See how you handle it. Alina played her part perfectly, asking the questions a desperate trucker would ask, demonstrating appropriate concern about risks, while making it clear that financial necessity was overriding her better judgment. Walsh shook his head. Maybe. When would this happen? We have something coming up in 3 days. Short run, good pay, minimal risk, perfect for a first time. We leave that to others. Alina took another tiny sip of her drink, her mind racing. 3 days. Whatever the Iron Vultures and Whitman were planned, it was going to happen soon. That's something you need to know till you're confirmed. However, I can assure you that it's not drugs, she said cautiously. I'd need to know more before committing. Of course. That's why you're here tonight, to meet some of the people you'd be working with. Get comfortable with the organization. Her pulse quickened as a tall figure, Viktor Koslov, the former Spetsnaz operative Alina had seen with Whitman, approached their booth. Quickened, but she maintained a neutral expression. Tyler, Koslov nodded, acknowledging that she was our possible new driver. Victor, meet Jaime Carter. She has 10 years of experience and a spotless record between opportunities. Alina shook his hand, cautious to keep Jaime Carter's manner intact, impressed by his obvious authority, but not intimidated. You look familiar, Cuff said abruptly, his eyes narrowing slightly. Have we met before? Alina's heart rate increased, but she maintained a puzzled expression. The employer wanted to see any potential drivers in person, so he turned to Walsh. I don't think so. I'm very new to this region. Clive kept examining her face. Maybe not. I meet a lot of people in my company. Bring her to the back room. Walsh nodded while standing. Come on, Jamie. This is a good sign that the big man doesn't meet everyone. Alina followed them through the packed bar to a private door at the back of the building. All of her instincts told her to be careful, since the boss might mean a lot of different things. There was a short hallway beyond the door that led to what had once been the bar's office, and Walsh knocked and opened it without waiting for a response. If it was a ladder, her cover would be blown instantly. She discreetly pressed the panic button on her bracelet once, not the full extraction signal, but a warning to Sophia and Daniel that things were getting out of hand. Sir, this is Jamie Carter, the driver I mentioned. Alina entered the room, preparing herself for whatever or whoever was waiting for her. Behind a desk, a man, thankfully not Whitman, sat with his face partially obscured by the dim lighting. He was older, heavier, and had the weathered face of someone who had traveled 4 decades. He wore the colors of the Iron Vultures, but his vest was more ornate than the others, marking I'm Frank Mercer. They call me the Colonel. I understand you're interested in driving for our organization, Miss Carter, he said in a gruff voice, referring to him as someone of significant rank. Alina recognized the name from her intelligence files. Frank, the Colonel Mercer, former military dishonorable. This was just the break she needed. Yes, sir, she said, adding the ideal amount of desperation and respect to Jaime Carter's voice. If the terms are as Mr. Walsh described them, Mercer said, gesturing to a chair across from his desk. Discharge for selling equipment on the black market. suspected of involvement in weapons trafficking across multiple states, and a direct connection to Whitman that is unconfirmed but very likely. Take a seat. Let's discuss your credentials. Alina realized she was coming close to the facts Ellis required as she sat down to mentally prepare for the most significant performance of her life. Whitman's involvement was confirmed. The Iron Vulture's next mission was detailed, and they had set up a conduit for transferring weapons across state boundaries. She was unaware that Mason Davis had left the hospital room 5 miles away in defiance of medical orders. Guidance. His face twisted in anger as he looked at a picture on his phone. His broken arm in a cast. Jamie Carter entering the building is depicted in a surveillance photo taken from the bus terminal that morning. An outdated FBI personnel file for Special Agent Alina Blackwood had just matched an image that a face recognition technology more advanced than anything a motorcycle gang should have had access to. With eyes that had witnessed too much of the darkness in the world, Colonel Frank Mercer examined Alina. As he flipped through a file of Jaime Carter's forged credentials, a masterwork of deceit produced by Sofia Martinez using hacked DMV databases and fabricated employment records, his weathered face remained expressionless. Mercer looked through her alleged driving history and identified Montana, Idaho, and Wyoming. "A lot of land has been traveled by you," Alina said in the voice of Jaime Carter. "I've lived on the road for 10 years. Where the work is, I go. Takes me, slowly." Mercer nodded. Then the work stopped. Timely convenience. Alina picked up on the hint of mistrust. Leaning forward, she let Jaime's desperation be seen. "I won't pretend that this was my first option. You see, I have consistently maintained a clean nose, stayed on the right side of the law. However, the rental truck is 3 months past due and has no possibilities." A person quickly becomes pragmatic. Klaus stood by the entrance with her arms folded and her gaze fixed on the door. There was still a lingering menace from his earlier remark that she looked familiar. Mercer went on, "You realize what we're providing isn't just a job, it's membership in an organization, a family with obligations and expectations." Tyler explained the basics. Alina added with care. Mercer's eyes did not meet his smile. Alina was careful with her word choice. "Did he now? And what exactly did Tyler explain?" "A test. That you transport specialized goods across state boundaries. That discretion is crucial. That the compensation is commensurate with the risk. That the company safeguards its own. And that you are at ease with that arrangement." With a hint of resentment in her tone, Alina responded, "Comfortable doesn't enter into it. I must have the money. I have to start over. So long as it doesn't involve breaking any rules." There was some unspoken connection between Mercer and Clav as they looked at each other. Alina kept Jaime Carter's apprehensive stance, mentally mapping out ways out in case things went wrong. Finally, Mercer stated, "We have a shipment moving in 3 days, Boise to Seattle. It's not our typical path, but things have needed to change. The shipment is high risk and high value. We require trustworthy drivers." "What sort of cargo?" "The type that spends $15,000 on a single day of driving." Alina's eyebrows went up, allowing Jaime Carter surprise to register. "That's significant." "It is, and there are significant expectations associated with it." Alina knowingly continued, "No questions, no inspections, no detours, and no law enforcement." Mercer grinned icily. As Alina realized she was getting near to the information Ellis need, she said, "We have arrangements in place to avoid official attention, but in the unlikely event of complications, there are protocols. You'll be briefed if you are selected. The specifics of a significant weapons shipment given the circumstances and the atypically high price." But she required more precise information about the times, places, and type of cargo. With conviction, she added, "I can manage it. All I need to know is where and when." Mercer studied her face and closed the file. "Only if you're accepted will you be given that information. Our vetting procedure is still ongoing." There was no knock, and the office door opened. A towering person, silhouetted against the light of the corridor, walked in. "Sorry I'm late," a voice that was uncannily familiar stated. Alina's blood stopped as she said, "Had a situation that required attention, the spirit of Charles Whitman, the guy who murdered her partner, and entered the room and shut the door after almost killing her 5 years prior. Tall and uncommanding, with sharp features and piercing blue eyes that seemed to see through all deceit, he looked just as she recalled. He wore a costly suit instead of tactical gear, and his blonde hair now had noticeable silver streaks around the temples. But other than that, time had not changed him. By sheer willpower, Alina managed to maintain a neutral expression, thankful for the slight makeup changes, colored contacts, and wig that transformed her look. Whitman walked behind Mercer's desk with the casual assurance of someone in authority and said, would it be enough that Whitman had seen her up close in Chicago, had looked into her eyes as he pulled the trigger? "This is our potential new driver," Whitman said. Mercer confirmed that it was Jaime Carter. "Desperate, experienced, and, Tyler says, sufficiently adept for our needs." Alina felt a shiver go through her when Whitman turned to face her. Seeing through layers, his eyes were assessing and calculating. Jaime Carter would look at her anxiously, but not obediently. Whitman said, "M. Carter," and held out his hand. "Wilson Charles, Mr. Mercer's organization hires me as a consultant." Despite all of her instincts telling her to attack in retaliation for Michael's death, Alina stood up and shook his hand. He held her firmly and professionally, showing no signs of the murderer she knew him to be. "Nice to meet you," she said steadily in spite of the adrenaline rushing through her. Whitman kept his gaze fixed on her hand for a second longer than was necessary. Then he turned to Mercer and let it drop. "Has the Seattle operation been explained?" To her, "Only the essentials, general payment method. No details as of yet." "Excellent." Whitman walked around the desk and leaned casually against it, but Alina could see the predatory stance between her and the door that controlled the room. "Have you ever handled security-sensitive cargo before, Miss Carter?" "It depends on what you mean," Alina said thoughtfully. "I've transported gadgets, medications, jewelry, and other items that needed extra care and discretion, but nothing that would breach federal laws pertaining to weapons. It was an expected trap." Alina gave in to Jaime Carter's anxiety. "Though I'm not aware of it, I understand what $15,000 for a day's drive could mean." Whitman grinned a little, sincerity, a welcome change. He gave Mercer a quick look. "I believe that, given the right safety measures, Miss Carter may be a good fit for our needs." Mercer nodded, comprehending some implicit directive. "Tomorrow, we'll set up a low-risk, minor test run to determine compatibility." Alina, seeing a chance to get additional intelligence, said, "I'm available." "Fantastic." Whitman stared into her face. "Miss Carter, there's something familiar about you. Have we met before?" Alina maintained a perplexed expression, despite her heart thumping against her ribs. "Not in my opinion. You remind me of someone I've met." Jaime Carter's persona includes a hint of flattery and a hint of attraction, a desperate lady who might take advantage of any opportunities that presented itself. Although there was a hint of doubt in Whitman's eyes, he appeared to accept this. "Maybe you make me think of someone. Whatever." He looked across at Clav. "Victor, kindly take Miss Carter out and give her the information for the test tomorrow." "Standard procedures." With a nod, Koslow opened the door. Alina stood in this manner, keeping Jaime Carter's slightly submissive stance. "I appreciate the chance, Mr. Mercer." "Wilson." Mr. Whitman bowed, observing her carefully as she stepped out. There was a palpable strain between her shoulder blades from the weight of his stare. Koslav gave her a burner phone in the corridor. "Tomorrow at 09:00, you will receive a text message with pickup coordinates. Arrive on time. Don't use your own phone at home." "What am I going to move?" "Something minor. An examination of have faith." Clive's eyes squinted a little. A word of caution. Tyler's judgment is trusted by the Colonel, but Mr. Wilson is warier. Don't offer him any grounds for skepticism. Alina put the phone in her pocket and nodded. I get it. The bar had gotten busier during her meeting, so they made their way back. Through it, Alina avoided making eye contact with the other customers by keeping her head down. Her thoughts were racing as she processed her meeting with Whitman. Although he hadn't recognized her right away, his remark that she appeared familiar was alarming. How long would she be able to hide? At the entryway, Clive placed a hand on her arm to halt her. In addition, there have been recent security issues. Someone observing our activities. His hand grew a little tighter. Miss Carter, you wouldn't know anything about that, would you? Alina looked him in the eye evenly. How would I? I arrived in town just now. After examining her face for a while, Clive let go of her arm. Yes, have a safe trip tonight. It was an obvious warning. They were watchful and skeptical. Her margin of error was getting less every minute. Alina resisted the temptation to glance over her shoulder as she quietly made her way outside to her car. She knew Sophia would be listening through the wire, so she didn't say anything until she was blocks away. Did you understand every single word? In her earpiece, Sophia confirmed. Whitman revealed his identity as Charles Wilson. Verification of a significant shipment from Seattle to Boise in 3 days, with a test run scheduled for tomorrow. Alina remarked, the shipment must be weapons, as she turned into a quiet residential street to make sure no one was pursuing her. The payout covered Whitman's direct involvement in security concerns. Everything fits. Sophia answered, Ellis wants you to pull out now. We've got enough to warrant a complete operation. The tactical group can assume control. Alina's hands clenched. The control panel. Not quite yet. Our opportunity to obtain precise route drop point contacts in Boise is tomorrow's test run. Whitman will vanish once more if we move right now. Alina, there was a caution in Sophia's voice. This is too close to you. Ellis worries that you're prioritizing retaliation over the mission. Alina retorted, I'm prioritizing thoroughness over bureaucratic caution. We'll have everything we need to shut down the entire operation after one more day and one test run. On the other end, there was silence. Ellis is then on the line. He wants a straight conversation with you. Alina let out a sigh. Put him through. Ellis's voice, forceful and tense, came across the secure link. You've done an excellent job, Blackwood, but you've already spoken with a Whitman directly, and your 24-hour period is almost over. The danger is intolerable. Respectfully, sir, we are about to discover a significant weapons trafficking group. Tomorrow's test run will provide us with the last bit of particular routes and make contact with the entire network. What happens if Whitman finds out who you are? What if he is already suspicious, and this test run is a trap? Alina had thought about it. The tactical team can then take over. Jackson and Martinez will be keeping an eye on everything, and I'll have the panic button. Ellis insisted that the danger was needless, enough to warrant a large-scale operation against the Iron Vultures. Mercer Koslov and the rest of the leadership can be swept away. But, Alina pointedly, not Whitman. He's very cautious and protected. Like Chicago, he'll vanish the instant he detects difficulty, and it will take 5 more years to find him. Ellis was quiet for a moment. Alina, this feels personal. She acknowledged that it is personal, but it doesn't mean it's not also the best course of action. You have all we need to destroy Whitman's whole enterprise, not just the Iron Vultures, with only 1 more day and 1 test run. Another long silence. 12 hours. Ellis finally, he stated, complete the test run, gather the intelligence, then, you're out, and the tactical team moves in. No exceptions, no extensions. Was that clear? Very clear. And Alina, you press the panic button right away if Whitman ever seems to recognize you. This procedure is not worth your life. Before she could reply, the line died. For a few minutes, Alina drove quietly while she processed the exchange. Ellis was incorrect about her intentions, but correct about the danger. She did wish to exact revenge on Michael for the bullet that Whitman had shot her, more than anything, though. She wanted to complete the task they had begun 5 years prior, in order to permanently eliminate a dangerous weapons trafficker from the picture. She avoided going back to Joe's garage in case she was being followed, and instead checked into a budget motel on the outskirts of Selene. Alina eventually gave herself permission to unwind a little after a safe check-in, with Sophia verifying her location. Like countless other rooms she had stayed in during her years with the Bureau, it was simple but clean. Alina guarded the perimeter, looked for surveillance equipment, and arranged furniture to offer tactical advantages if necessary. Then, pleased to momentarily shed her Jaime Carter identity, she took off her wig and contacts. In the restroom, Alina Blackwood's face was fixed resolutely on her blue eyes in the mirror. The constraining wig has been removed from the blonde hair. The face of a lady who refused to lose after losing everything once. She lightly caressed the scar on her abdomen, a tangible reminder of unresolved matters. She may only have tomorrow to finish that task, to make sure Whitman was held accountable for Michael's passing, her own near-death experience, and the many lives lost due to the weapons he trafficked. Her mind replayed the interaction with Whitman, examining every word and gesture for clues that he had recognized her, and she fell asleep in fits. Alina was already up at the crack of dawn, getting ready for the day. She meticulously reapplied the identity of Jaime Carter, the contacts, the wig, the minor makeup changes, the slightly altered posture, and the slightly altered speech patterns. At exactly 900 a.m., of a text message with directions to a spot 30 meters east and orders to arrive at 11 Omaru buzzed through the burner phone. After committing the address to memory, Alina called Sophia. The test run coordinates have been received. The land in the remote area National Forest indicates that they are selecting remote areas with caution. I know where it is, Sophia said. A fire access route with little human activity is visible on satellite photography. Alina said softly, good place for an ambush or an exchange. Eagle will be positioned so that it can watch the meeting spot. If necessary, the tactical team is on standby for 20 minutes. Even though Sophia couldn't see it, Alina nodded. I'm leaving. Keep the lines of communication closed, unless emergency procedures are triggered. She drove carefully to her destination, watching for pursuit or observation at all times. Off a Forest Service road, the coordinates led to a gravel turnout, secluded with limited escape routes, but excellent visibility in all directions. With her senses of the engine running sharpened, Alina parked and waited. At precisely 11, I drove a.m. on the woodland road. A black SUV slowly came into view. As it passed her rented car, Tyler Walsh appeared through the lowered passenger window. He responded, right on time, with approval. Alina nodded and put her car in gear as the SUV sped forward, saying, follow us. Stay close. They pushed farther into the woods. After a while, they turned onto a smaller access road that went through thick trees. About 15 minutes later, they came out into a tiny clearing with a plain panel van parked there. With his arms folded and an enigmatic expression, Victor Clave stood next to the van. Alina parked and got out of her car, coming up with the wary air of Jaime Carter. Good morning, she said. Koslow gave a nod, abruptly. It's an easy test for you. Go to Spokane in this vehicle. Park it where it is supposed to be. Leave. Avoid looking inside. Do not stray from the path. He gave her an envelope that was sealed. It contains $5,000, a key, and GPS coordinates. After a successful completion, half is half. Alina accepted the envelope, checking its contents with a quick glance. It seems simple enough. It is, Walsh said. Think of it as a reciprocal trust-building activity. Any certain guidelines for handling? As she walked around the van to give it a thorough inspection, Alina questioned, "Not at all. Drive as usual. Respect traffic laws. If you are stopped by the police for whatever reason, you have no idea who we are." In the glove compartment, you were delivering office supplies for a business whose name appears on the rental agreement. Alina gave a nod, simple enough and in line with conventional trafficking practices, which reserve trusted workers for high-value cargo and use unaware or semi-witting drivers for lower-risk shipments. "When will I receive information about the Seattle position?" In a business-like tone, she inquired. "Succeed with this, and we'll talk," Clive said. Mayor Wilson was reticent, particular. "You must first establish your worth." Even though Alina felt cold at the thought of Whitman, she remained calm. "All right, when the delivery is finished, I'll give the number a call." Walsh gave her the keys to the van and stated, "We'll get in touch with you. Don't get interested in what you're delivering. Hire me." It wouldn't work out. It was an obvious warning. Alina nodded and took the keys. "I get it. In a few hours. See you." Alina got into the van while Walsh and Koslov went back to their SUV. There was nothing obviously strange about the car's exterior, despite the fact that it was older and well maintained. Unlike a typical delivery van, there was a substantial partition separating the cargo area from the cabin. The SUV flashed its lights and turned away, leaving Alina alone as she started the engine and followed it back to the main woodland road. She looked up the GPS coordinates in the envelope, which pointed to a Spoke and shopping center parking lot about 90 minutes away. Knowing Sophia would be watching, Alina spoke softly after the SUV had disappeared from view. "I got the package. Van delivery to Spokane. Its contents are unknown. However, it is probably a test shipment of weaponry or similar supplies." Sophia answered via her earpiece. "Copy that. Eagle is keeping a safe distance from your path. After you leave the area, a forensics team will be waiting at the drop-off location to inspect the van." Recognized, Alina kept her cover as a professional driver, making a regular delivery by driving exactly at the speed limit. She fought the urge to inspect the shipment in order to have first-hand knowledge of what the Iron Vultures were smuggling. The entire operation would be at risk if she compromised her cover now, because the van might be being watched. The trip to Spokane went smoothly. There is no hint of what might be in the van's cargo area, and it handles normally. Alina continued to be on the lookout for any indications of surveillance, but she found nothing unusual. Shortly after 1 o'clock, she reached the assigned parking lot. Alina parked the van in a spot away from the main shopping area as directed, locked it, and left without turning around. During a quick stop for gas insurance, she had slipped a small tracker beneath the van's bumper so the FBI could find it later if needed. Remaining silent until she was positive she wasn't being followed, Alina took a cab back to her motel. She didn't get in touch with Sophia again until she was safely in her room. "Delivery is finished. Drop clean." "No issues. Fantastic," Sophia answered. "Ellis is happy." After the Iron Vultures personnel have recovered the vehicle, the forensics team will take up residence. Hopefully, by tonight, we'll have proof of what they're trafficking. During the operation, was there any indication of surveillance? No. It looks like you've passed their test. With her shoulders relaxed, Alina sat on the side of the bed. "We're currently waiting for a call from them regarding the Seattle operation. Remember the contract," Sophia said. "You leave and the tactical team takes over as soon as we know the specifics of the shipment from Seattle, Boise." I recall. The Iron Vultures did not make contact for hours. Alina kept Jaime Carter's identity intact in her hotel room in case of unforeseen guests. The burner phone was still silent in the evening. During their planned check-in, she informed Sophia that something was amiss. By now, they ought to have gotten in touch. Sophia reported that the van was picked up 2 hours after you dropped. Although preliminary investigations reveal the presence of weapons components, namely specialized parts likely for assault rifles, our team is still evaluating trace evidence. It's a real operation, so why haven't they gotten in touch with Emmy? Alina walked around the tiny space. Was there something I missed? Was I created? No sign of that. Perhaps they are simply exercising caution. Alina wasn't persuaded. Danger was being signaled by her instincts, which she had developed over years of working underground. I'm going to do a recon pass by the broken spoke. See if there's unusual activity. That's not advisable, Sophia said. We need to know whether they are suspicious, since they might be accelerating their time frame due to outside pressure. Or you might be stepping into a trap. Before Sophia could raise any more objections, Alina had already started to put Jaime Carter's disguise back on. She was driving past the broken spoke 20 minutes later, looking around the parking lot at a leisurely pace, with more cars. Than the night before, the tavern looked livelier than usual. As she went by, Alina noticed a number of strange faces standing watch outside Harder Mel's with the distinct demeanor of professional security, not typical Iron Vulture's members. Alina went around in circles the block and pulled into a spot where you could see the door to the pub. There was undoubtedly something going on. The extraordinary activity in the middle of the week and the heightened security hinted that a major event was being prepared for. At 9:43 p.m., her burner phone finally buzzed. A message by SMS from an unidentified number. The job specifications have changed. We will meet at the same location as today at 06:00 tomorrow. Come by yourself, Alina's intuition warned her. The timeline shifted suddenly. It felt incorrect because of the strange wording. Are you getting this, Martinez? She whispered. Yes, Sophia answered. It doesn't fit with the way they used to communicate. They are either setting a trap or speeding up the schedule. Or both. Ellis wants you to stop. We've got enough to proceed with the Iron Vultures. Alina saw two more SUVs arrive into the parking area of the bar. Tactical-clad men appeared, moving with military accuracy. Professionals, not bikers. There's something big going on, she noted. They are organizing. We risk missing the wider picture if we act now. Alina, this is outside of your 24-hour window. You must get down. Ellis is telling you. Alina wasn't paying attention, though. A well-known person had just come out of the bar. Koslav and two armed guards stand on either side of Charles Whitman. After a brief conversation, they dispersed to various cars. Alina reported that Whitman is on the move, taking a security detail to a black Escalade. Avoid following him, Sophia advised. Immediate, again, don't participate. The tactical crew is preparing to arrive at your site. Alina had only a moment to make up her mind. Keeping up with Whitman was dangerous, possibly suicidal, but allowing him to vanish once more, perhaps for an additional 5 years. That was not an outcome she could tolerate. She started her engine and said, I need to know where he's going. We need to know if they are altering plans or speeding up the shipping. Don't, Alina. She silenced Sophia's protests by taking off the earphones. The Escalade was heading north when it pulled out of the parking lot. Alina followed at a noticeable distance after waiting until it was 2 blocks ahead. She kept watch while the Escalade drove north on back roads for half an hour, then turned onto a private drive that led to what looked like an abandoned airfield. Alina paused at the doorway, peering through binoculars as Whitman's car drew closer to a tiny hangar with blazing lights. The hangar doors were open, and she saw guys in the same tactical gear she'd seen at the bar loading a twin-engine cargo jet. Big crates were being moved into the cargo hold of the airplane from a semi-trail. Tonight, they decided to transport the shipment by air instead of by road. According to the Seattle Boise, there had been a change in plans or a diversion brought on by unanticipated events. Alina used her camera to record the event getting crisp pictures of Whitman overseeing the loading procedure. They required concrete proof of his involvement in the trafficking of weapons, and this was it. Headlights came into view, her rear view mirror, just as she was going to back away and make contact with Sophia again. A car was speeding up behind her, blocking her escape path. Alina realized she was defenseless as she reached for her firearm, a conscious decision made for the test run to prevent suspicion in the event of a search. She had few choices: get out of the car and try to flee on foot, either boldly as Jaime Carter or via uncharted areas. Another black SUV skidded to a stop behind her, preventing her from identifying the oncoming car. Armed men appeared with their rifles drawn as doors opened. One yelled, "Hands where we can see them. Now get out of the car." Alina carefully lifted her hands as her thoughts whirled through possible outcomes. The police were not local. They served as Whitman's guards. She was exposed. As directed, she got out of the car, moving deliberately and in a non-threatening manner. With expert methods, the men approached with caution. In order to search her, one grabbed her and forcefully slammed her against the automobile. He found no weapons and reported that she was clean. Another man came forward, Victor Clove, looking sullen. "Agent Blackwood, or should I say Miss Carter?" Alina's heart froze. They were aware of who she really was. "I have no idea what you're discussing." She tried to keep her voice like Jaime Carter's. Clove grinned sarcastically. "Keep it." The combination of facial recognition technology and access to confidential federal employment records is quite amazing. He gave his guys a nod. "Bring her. Mr. Wilson would like to speak with you before he leaves." Alina thought about what she could do. Now that she was outnumbered and unarmed, she would probably die in the battle. Playing for time is preferable. Hope that even though she had taken off the earphones, Sophia and Daniel had managed to find her. Allowing herself to be guided toward the hangar, she kept her eyes open for any chance of escape. There was open ground and the airfield was remote, challenging terrain for an escape attempt around the hangar complex. Inside, where the surroundings might provide cover or make makeshift weapons, she would have the best chance. The loading procedure proceeded with military efficiency within the hangar. A modified Cessna Caravan with extended range tanks, the cargo plane was almost full. At least 20 sizable packages with insignia like those of military weapons were counted. By Alina, Whitman was standing close to the aircraft, looking at a manifest. As they got closer, he looked up, his face changing from annoyance to astonishment, then to a more nuanced recognition, and finally to a chilly smile. Declaring, "I don't have Blackwood," he gave the manifest to a helper. "But what a surprise. Joy, when we first met last night, I guess I should have followed my gut." Those eyes, even from behind, had a familiar quality, colorful contact lenses. Alina remained silent while evaluating the circumstances. There were 12 armed, military-looking men in the hangar. The aircraft was almost loaded, despite being captured. Whitman didn't appear hurried. An alarming indication. "I have nothing to say." Whitman took a step forward. No promises of retribution or justice. "I nearly feel let down. Would it change anything?" Alina answered in her own words, dropping the Jaime Carter charade. Whitman laughed. "No, I guess not, but I'm interested. After Chicago, did you really think I could be fooled by a wig and makeup?" Alina pointed out that it tricked you for a full day, long enough to record everything you do. This package and this location are known to the FBI. They're currently en route. A deliberate bluff with the possibility of truth. If the tactical team would be mobilizing, as Sophia and Daniel had located her car. Whitman didn't appear to care. "Maybe, but they won't get there in time to stop us from leaving. Or, I fear, to save you." Clove produced a zip tie and fastened Alina's hands behind her back when he nodded. He tugged it too tight, and the plastic sliced into her wrists. Now what? Despite the increasing danger, Alina asked in a firm voice. Whitman looked at his watch now. We now finish loading and head off to our objective, deciding how to handle you along the way. Somewhere over the mountains is where I'm thinking about dropping you. Isn't there a certain symmetry to that? One of my bullets missed you. Let's test your ability to withstand a 15,000-foot drop. What Alina remembered from Chicago was the casual cruelty. Whitman had used the same tone before shooting her and abandoning her next to Michael's body. The weapons, she added, gesturing at the aircraft. For whom are they intended? Whitman's eyebrow went up. Professional curiosity is excellent. They are traveling to an area of war where these kinds of goods are highly valued. The details are irrelevant. They are just another set of idealists who are prepared to spend a lot of money on the instruments of their revolution. Additionally, the Iron Vultures are merely puppets in your scheme. Helpful middlemen, local power with easy-to-use transit systems, and the ability to evade police scrutiny. Whitman gave a shrug. Like all assets, they eventually become expendable. Alina watched as the final cargo was loaded onto the aircraft. There was not much time left. If the tactical team was coming, they wouldn't get there before the plane took off. She had to take action to gain time by creating a distraction. Was a mole present? She inquired abruptly. Someone who betrayed our operation in Chicago. The first sincere response she had witnessed from Whitman was a little narrowing of his eyes. All this time, you never figured it out. Who was it? Whitman's face lit up slowly with a smile. Agent Blackwood. It wasn't a who. It wasn't a who. It was a what. You thought your communications were secure, but they weren't. Basic technology used correctly. Alina felt the realization as if it were a bodily blow. Despite the fact that it was only a technical flaw, she had been suspicious of betrayal from within 4 years and had distanced herself from her friends and co-workers as a result. Whitman was observing her features and taking pleasure in her response. You made yourself vulnerable, alienated your colleagues and support system, and isolated yourself pointlessly. He bent in. Because you couldn't trust anyone, you're here, by yourself now, without a backup, and on the verge of death. He was unaware of how deeply the comments penetrated Alina's self-imposed seclusion over the previous 5 years. But they also set off a chain reaction. Otherwise, the knowledge that she had been mistaken, she did have trustworthy people in her life. They were pursuing her, including Sophia, Daniel, and Ellis in his bureaucratic manner. They must have been. Whitman was approached by the pilot. Sir, we're loaded and prepared to leave. Fantastic. Whitman looked across at Koslov. Take her on board. We'll have a more private talk later. Alina took the initiative as Klav took hold of her arm and guided her to the aircraft. She pushed her head back, making a firm contact with his nose. She fell to one knee and swung her leg in as he whirled from the collision. He took his feet out. From under him were a broad arc. The hangar was in disarray. Men with guns yelled, weapons raised. Whitman yelled commands, his poise finally giving out. The wood around Alina was splintered by the gunshots as she rolled behind a pile of empty crates. She had few choices because her wrists were still chained behind her back, but she wasn't going down quietly. She stayed low, taking advantage of the disarray as she made her way through the labyrinth of cartons. She had a slight but real possibility of fleeing into the darkness outdoors if she could make it to the hangar door. One of Whitman's security personnel materialized around the corner of her temporary refuge. Alina threw herself forward and slammed her shoulder into his middle before he could lift his weapon. She was able to roll to place her bound hands close to his holstered sidearm as they descended together. Just as another guard came around the corner with a weapon pointed at her head, her fingers wrapped around it. Alina froze, trapped in a precarious situation. Then, with the exception of emergency escape signs, the hangar lights went off, leaving the room completely dark. From outside the hangar came gunfire. Alina recognized the exact controlled blasts as tactical team protocols right away. Daniel and Sophia had located her. The horsemen had come. Alina was able to move her bound wrists beneath her legs and bring them in front of her torso, amid the confusion and darkness. At least she could now utilize the weapon she had obtained, even though the zip tie was too tight to take off. The FBI announced their arrival in the hangar, with shouted orders for everyone to surrender. Reluctant to risk getting caught in the gunfire, Alina remained low and moved toward the exit. She noticed movement close to the plane as her eyes adapted to the darkness. Whitman entering the aircraft accompanied by 2 guards. He was running away. Alina could not allow that to occur. Never again. She made a deliberate maneuver, now advancing toward the plane while using the tactical team's ingress as cover. The pilot was already spinning up the Cessna's engines in anticipation of an emergency departure. Alina arrived at the tarmac's edge, just as Whitman closed the plane's door. Despite the FBI's presence, the plane turned toward the runway and started to taxi. A car was driving across the airfield in the direction of the taxiing jet when headlights came on. Alina recognized it at once. Sophia Martinez was leaning out the passenger window of Daniel Jackson's SUV, pointing a firearm toward the engines of the airplane. Sophia fired 3 accurate shots. The cowling emitted black smoke as the right engine sputtered and died. The aircraft abruptly veered and stopped at the runway's edge. Members of the FBI tactical team stormed the plane, encircling it with their firearms out. First the pilot came out, then the security guards, but not Whitman, with their hands up, though her wrists were shackled. Alina approached warily, her newly acquired weapon at the ready. In accordance with procedures for potentially explosive circumstances, the tactical crew had secured the perimeter, but had not yet boarded the aircraft. Instead of seeing someone approach her, she sensed a familiar, determined expression on Daniel Jackson's face as he wore a tactical vest over his clothes. He said, "You shouldn't be here," without glancing at her. "Neither should you," the woman said. "I assumed you were merely monitoring." His lips formed a ghostly smile. He pulled out a knife, sliced through her zip ties, and released her hands, saying, "Plans change when teammates go rogue. He's still in there." "Yes." Daniel glanced to the tactical team commander, who issued a hand signal. The group got ready to break into the plane. The door of the jet opened again before they could get away. Charles Whitman cried out. Special Agent Blackwood, disregarding the tactical team's yelled orders. Charles Whitman emerged slowly, hands raised, face composed despite the chaos around him. Alina stepped forward and placed her rifle on Whitman's chest, saying, "It appears your backup arrived after all." The commander of the tactical squad yelled at her to get down, but she kept moving forward until she found herself standing at the base of the plane's stairs, staring up at the guy who had murdered her partner and attempted to murder her. She said, "Charles Whitman," earlier. With the same icy smirk she recalled from Chicago, Whitman said, "You're under arrest for the murder of Special Agent Michael Chen, attempted murder of a federal agent, illegal weapons trafficking, and whatever else the prosecutors can think of." "Agent Blackwood, are you certain you wouldn't prefer to simply pull that trigger? After Michael, what did I take from you?" Alina briefly experienced the desire, the allure of revenge, the ease with which justice can be served by taking this man's life. Almost gradually, her finger tightened on the trigger. Then she sensed someone standing next to her. Standing shoulder to shoulder with her former teammate is Sophia Martinez. The words "he's not worth it, Alina," were spoken softly by Sophia. "This is not what Michael would want." The words cut through the haze of retaliation that had impairing Alina's judgment. Michael would not have approved of her turning into a murderer in order to compromise her morals, in order to get revenge. Despite its flaws, he had faith in justice through the system. "Perhaps Alina told you to go down on your knees, hands behind your head, and to keep your voice steady." When Whitman saw she wouldn't be provoked, his smile dimmed. He knelt at the top of the steps and obeyed slowly. Whitman was expertly secured by the tactical unit as they advanced. He hesitated for a moment as they let him go by Alina. "This isn't over," he said, whispered. Alina looked him in the eye steadily. "Men like me, we don't stay in cages." The adrenaline that had kept Alina going started to run out as Whitman was carried away, leaving fatigue in its wake. "Then I'll be waiting when you try to leave yours." In the excitement of the moment, she had failed to see injuries, but now she did. Her raw skin, a cut on her forehead that was bleeding profusely, and bruised ribs from taking down the zip-tied wrists. Daniel and Sophia stood at her sides, silently supporting her. The tactical squad was behind them, locking down the hangar, recording the weapons cache, and apprehending the remaining Whitman security guards and iron vultures. "You removed your earpiece," Sophia replied, her voice carrying a hint of reproach. "I needed to concentrate," explained Alina. "How did you come across me?" Daniel replied. "The tracker in your shoe. When a teammate goes off the grid, it's standard protocol." Startled, Alina glanced down at her footwear. "When was the gas station busted?" "When you stopped on the way back after the test run," Sophie explained. "Blackwood, you're not the only one with cunning, in spite of all." It made Alina smile. They had planned 4 contingencies because they had anticipated her conduct. They had been prepared since they knew her well enough to anticipate that she may turn against them. They were her squad, and always had been. 30 minutes later, Director Ellis showed up, looking with a complicated mixture of relief, annoyance, and professional satisfaction as he examined the weapons that had been seized and the individuals that had been taken into custody. "Agent Blackwood," he said sharply, referring to her previous designation. "I think I told you to get down." "You did, sir," Alina said. "I use my discretion to ignore such order in light of evolving circumstances." Ellis's eyebrow went up, emerging situations such as Whitman's possible escape, among other things. Ellis let out a sigh, yet underlying his frustration was a trace of affection. He pointed to the hangar, where FBI evidence technicians were classifying what looked like millions of dollars worth of illicit weapons, saying, "The methods are still unconventional, but the results are impressive." Alina accepted the backhanded praise and nodded, saying, "The results speak for themselves. What about the leadership of the Iron Vultures?" At the same time as our action, Mercer Clave rounded up at the Broken Spoke. Martinez's suggestion was to launch a concerted attack to stop anyone from getting lost in the chaos. Alina looked to Sophia, who gave a humble shrug. Simply effective operational planning. A medical professional came to assess Alina's wounds, but she dismissed him. She turned back to Ellis after a minute. "Now what? We're processing one of the biggest weapon seizures in the history of the Bureau," Ellis thought. "We take down Whitman's trafficking organization and create a solid case that results in him receiving consecutive life sentences." "And me," Ellis said, examining her face. "That depends." He left the alternative unstated, but obvious. "What do you want?" "Alina, to go back to trucking her." Alina observed the well-organized turmoil at the crime scene as FBI officers secured suspects, documented evidence, and followed the procedures she used to know by heart. Despite her 5 years of pushing them away, she saw Sophia and Daniel standing close to the teammates who had come for her. "Finally, I need to think about it," she remarked. Ellis gave a nod. "Take your time, but know that if you want to, you can find a place. The Bureau might need someone with your unique set of abilities and perseverance. He's been trying to recruit you back for years," Sophia said. "Even had a special position in mind instructor at Quantico, training the next generation of undercover operatives, pushing papers, teaching classrooms full of rookies." Alina shook her head. "Not my style." He moved away to coordinate with the tactical team leader, leaving Alina with her former teammates. Daniel clarified, A role that would value your experience without requiring you to follow the typical bureau structures, would be working actual operations and mentoring agents in real-world scenarios. You've talked about this, Alina said, raising an eyebrow. Over the past 5 years, while you were away playing trucker, we might have had a conversation or two, Sophia acknowledged. I needed the time, she added quietly. After Chicago, after Michael, Daniel nodded. Alina saw a change in herself, a weight beginning to lighten, a wall beginning to break. Her voice was free of judgment, simply friendly teasing between old friends. Alina looked at her friends with a newfound appreciation as she acknowledged, "We know, but you don't have to do everything alone anymore, Alina. That's what got you into trouble tonight, and what got me out of it." As dawn broke over the airfield, throwing long shadows from the hangar, Alina watched Whitman being loaded into a secure transport vehicle, their eyes briefly meeting through the window, predator and prey roles now reversed. 3 days later, Alina Blackwood stood in Joe's garage in Spokane, packing the last of her surveillance equipment, her truck fueled and ready, her legitimate shipping business still operating. She felt no triumph, no satisfaction, just a sense of completion, a chapter ending, perhaps a new one beginning. The ghost that had haunted her for 5 years was finally exorcised. Sophia and Daniel, who had been debriefing in Seattle and assisting in the development of the case against Whitman and the Iron Vulture's leadership, were admitted as the door opened, despite her brief return to bureau work. "So, you're really going back to trucking?" Alina shut her equipment case, and Sophia, sitting on the edge of the workbench, inquired. After Daniel leaned against the wall with his arms crossed, Alina looked around the garage, at the truck that had served as her home and cover for 5 years. She then said, "I'll consider Ellis's offer. No promises." Sophia grinned. "Now, I have deliveries scheduled, clients expecting their shipments." He believed that after the operation, you would vanish once more. "I thought about it," Alina said. "Old habits, bad habits." Daniel clarified, repeating Sophia's previous conclusion. Alina nodded, admitting that he was right. "I'm working on it." "Thank you," she said simply, "for coming when I needed you, even though I didn't ask," as she turned to face her former teammates, her pals feeling an unexpected reluctance to leave, after helping her load the rest of her items into the truck. "That's what teammates do. Keep that in mind." Sophia drew her into a firm embrace. Daniel then gave her a firm and comforting hug, saying, "The offer stands whenever you're wired. The Bureau needs people like you, Alina, people who understand the cost of the work, but do it anyway." Alina nodded, her throat tightening with emotion. "Next time you're tempted to go lone wolf on us." She hopped into her truck, the familiar cab reassuring after the intensity of the previous several days, and Sophia yelled up to her as she started the engine, asking, "What about the pendant? Will you put it on once more?" Alina took the FBI tactical unit symbol from her equipment wallet and didn't put it back on, so she stroked the spot on her neck where it had been hanging. "Maybe," she remarked reflectively, "when I'm prepared." She left the garage and made her way to the open road that had served as her haven for 5 years. Alina felt different this time, though, as the miles unraveled beneath her wheels, somehow lighter, as though she'd put down a weight she hadn't really admitted to having. Daniel and Sophia watched in her rearview mirror. She raised her hands in farewell as she left. Alina recognized it was not farewell until the next time. The scenery of Montana revealed itself to her as she traveled across a big and lovely area in the summer light. The path ahead was unobstructed, extending to beyond the horizon. For the first time in 5 years, Alina Blackwood found herself anticipating instead of back. At last, if not quite silenced, the ghost of Chicago became quiet. She would complete her contracts, deliver her cargo, and then maybe it would be time for a change of pace. Not going back to the route, but in a different way. A future that encompassed everything she had been and everything she had been agent of the FBI, survivor and trucker. She saw the roadway in front of her, a ribbon of opportunity slicing through the American heartland. One of the FBI's most wanted individuals was apprehended by Alina Blackwood, the trucker girl who had flipped a man into a windshield. Finally, with the accelerator depressed, I sped toward whatever was ahead. Discover what she could become.